So I welcome you all for another Let's Talk Climate Change talk organized by the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability at Azim Premji University. So we have been organizing these talks for a few months now, and we covered various topics from energy, weather, ecosystem, like energy modeling, etc. So today we are actually at a time where we're going to be seeing very interesting, like fascinating stories, climate, and you can say the environmental degradation by the speaker. So I welcome Arati Rao, and so before I guess I'll say a few things about who she is. Arati is an independent photographer, writer, and National Geographic Explorer. And she takes an interest in documenting environmental degradation that has reached very, very worrying state. She chronicles how drastically depleting groundwater, habitat destruction, and land acquisition for industry devastates biodiversity and shrinks common lands, and millions and pushing basically species towards extinction. Arati was named in BBC's 100 influential and inspiring women in 2023 worldwide. Her work was appeared in National Geographic magazine, Emergence magazine, BBC, outside sources, etc. And today she is going to talk about her book, Marginlands, Indian Landscapes on the Brink, where she has combined enthralling nature writing and journalism with immersive art and photography. So the book is displayed outside, so you can take a look, and it's also available in Amazon to buy. Having said that, I welcome Arati to the stage.
Thank you so much, Shantanu. Thank you, Azim Premji University, for having me, and BIC for hosting this, and all of you for making it out on a Friday evening, braving the roads of Bangalore to come here. We're going to play, so it's not going, I want this to be a little more interactive. I don't want to only be speaking, so we're going to play a little game where I'm going to propose two different things, and I'm going to ask for what the connection is in between those things. And then I'm going to tell you a story of how they connect up. Of course, for those of you who have read my book, you might know the answer, but those who haven't, it'll be lovely to just try and hazard guesses. Let's jump straight into it. Okay, so number one, first one. What's the connection between your shrimp cocktail and an oil spill? Any show of hands? Anybody'd like to hazard a guess? Nobody's read my book. Okay, let's try and get those guys now to speak up. Anybody? Okay, cool. So somebody has. All right, great. I'm going to jump straight into it. We are in the largest unbroken stand of mangroves in the world, the Sundarbans. This straddles the border between India and Bangladesh, 60% in Bangladesh, 40% in India. And we are in the dead of winter, December 2014. It's very early in the morning. The sun is just about rising, and the fog hangs thickly over the mangrove forests. Visibility is really, really poor. There is an oil tanker which has moored itself in the center of a highly biodiverse river called the Shela River in the Sundarbans, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a very, very eco-sensitive region. There's an oil tanker that has moored itself in the center of the river for the night. They have to moor in the center of the river for various reasons, including tigers. And early morning, 5:30, there is another ship that is chugging through the river. It's chugging, chugging, chugging. It does not see the oil tanker, and it rams into it. The oil tanker empties its belly of 358,000 liters of furnace oil into the Sundarban. And this is Sundarban National Park on the Bangladesh side. It is the UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there is oil that's painting a black stripe along the 80 kilometers that the that is the length of the forest. If you were on a boat and I was on a boat, if I looked down, this is what I was seeing. Just oil, a film after film of oil. I was in the exact same place on the exact same boat 3 months before that. And what I could see was sundari seeds, which were being carried by the river and dispersed, and which would have settled somewhere and given birth to trees. Now, in December, this is what I was seeing, what's on the other side, which is oil. What was worse was that the government washed its hands off the oil spill, and it fell upon the fishers who lived in that region and their families, children, to clean up the oil with bare hands. They had no gloves, no shoes, no masks, nothing. And so they were using their kitchen utensils to clean up the oil. And they were covered in heavy fuel oil. They were also heating up the foliage to release the oil. So there were fumes in the air. They were doing nothing. These people fell sick. All kinds of things happened. The government just completely washed their hands off it. When the UN, because of course this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the UN decided to come see, what the government did was it ordered all of the oil that had been collected and all the oil foliage to be buried. So when the UN came, there was nothing almost. You could only see the black stripe, which showed that there was an oil spill, but there was no other evidence of the oil spill. Now, still, what's the connection with shrimp, right? The question is, why are these ships plying through something as eco-sensitive and biodiverse as the Sundarban? These are massive ships, and some of them are not very well kept. There is an IMO regulation that you have to have a double-hulled ship to carry oil. Many of these are not double-hulled, and they're carrying oil, right? And they ran aground. Now, actually, they were not supposed to go through the Sundarban. There is a port in Bangladesh called Mongla, which is a very, very important port for various reasons for the country. And there is a small river called Mongla River, which was the original way that the ships would go. So it bypassed the whole eco-sensitive region, the forest, and came down into the river on the inhabited side of the Sundarban. But something changed in 2011. This is what that Mongla River looked like way back in 2000. This is how it looked like in 2010, and you can start seeing small things coming up here. Those are shrimp farms, right? And then in 2013, the shrimp farms increase on both sides of Mongla River. And these shrimp farms are bought up by the very rich and connected people in the country. It's an extremely lucrative land grab. And so this channel, called the Ghasiya Kali channel, was actually shut off in 2011 so that people could land grab and make their shrimp farms, and it's highly lucrative, as you would know. And so what ended up happening is, look at the silt build-up, right? The silt build-up. And so, of course, the ships can't ply over here anymore. And this is how it is in 2015, January. 2014, December was when the oil spill happened. So, of course, there was nothing that could ply, and they had not dredged the area, and so on. But, of course, there was a hue and cry after that, and things have changed. And I just checked Google Maps recently, and they have dredged at the place, and now that channel is open again, and ships are plying there. But as recently as 29th, so when it was not plying, this is how it had to go, which is through the forest. And where I stop, that's where the oil spill happened. Right there, just when it entered the forest, right? So while the channel is open right now, we are not out of the woods yet. There are still mishaps happening. There are ships going through the Indian Sundarban. This is in the Indian Sundarban. It goes right through the Indian Sundarban, takes a turn, goes up into the Bangladeshi Sundarban, and even today, look at the amount of mishaps. This is just in the first few This is the first few weeks of 2022, and look at the amount of mishaps. And then, as recently as 29th December 2023, there has been yet another mishap in the Bangladeshi Sundarban, and there has been fly ash that was spilt, right? So that's the connection. So the shrimp being so lucrative, but also being extremely hazardous because of all the things that, that cascaded down from that need to have shrimp. Okay, so we're going to number 2. What's connection number 2? What's the connection between Calcutta port in the 1800s and 1900s, so the 19th century basically, and some part of the 20th century? What's the connection between the Calcutta port then and unemployment in Bihar, eastern Bihar today? The Calcutta port was an extremely important port for the British because they wanted a very viable port that would be able to connect to the other big cities of the world at the time and go inland in India to Assam for all of their raw materials, jute, cotton, all of that, rice, everything. So Calcutta port was really important. But Calcutta port sat at the edge of at the mouth of the Ganga, near the Ganga. And the Ganga is one of the most silty rivers on earth. The color of the Ganga is the color of tea, as you can see. It's like a soup, and it's thick. So the port started silting up. And so, of course, the British were very, very worried because if the port silted up, then that would hurt trade, and trade was everything. And so they decided that they had to come up with some kind of a grand plan to save the Kolkata port. It was Calcutta then, Kolkata now. They went through many iterations, and finally somebody suggested, so Arthur Cotton suggested, that they build a dam upstream and flush fresh water down to the port so that it can flush the silt out. They couldn't agree, the Britishers couldn't agree on where to build the dam. And they left India, and then India gained independence, and this whole thing came up again because the port was still silting up, and that wasn't gone. And so they dredged up the old plans, and they saw that maybe Farakka, a town in North Bengal, might be a place. That's exactly where the Ganga bends from Bihar and comes into West Bengal. So it just about enters the head of its delta. And so they said, okay, let's build it over there. Let's build the dam there and create a channel where you can just push the water, and it would then keep the whole port free. You know, you can periodically push the silt out. Fantastic idea. So what they did was they did go ahead and build in 1971. They built the Farakka barrage, and I'm sure you'll have heard of the Farakka barrage. It is a 2.6 kilometer long barrage that sits on top of the Ganga, the main stem of the Ganga, at Farakka, and therefore called Farakka barrage. And that's it. This is the channel that diverts the water and pushes it down through the Hooghly and off to clear the port. Surprise, surprise. There was something that none of the engineers that had come up with this idea, either British or Indian, realized. And that was this. This is a tidal delta. The tide comes in twice a day. And it ended up bringing in 160 times the amount of silt any water could push out. So till today, that port has a siltation problem. Never got solved, right? But what ended up happening was far more sinister. And that had to do with a certain fish. Actually, 3 things happened, but I'm going to only talk about one. And that has to do with a certain fish called the hilsa. If there's any Bengali, and I know Shantanu is here, so at least one Bengali is here, you know what hilsa is and how important and iconic that fish is to the Bengalis. And it is a wonderfully silver, beautiful, big fish which swims upstream to spawn, and then comes back, lives its life out in the estuary. So it was earlier thought to be an anadromous fish, but I've read recently that it's been revised to be a diadromous fish. So it does both things. And people depend upon it. This is such a lucrative fishery. The Hilsa fishery it sustains millions of fishermen. But then you built a dam. Now, the fish used to go upriver, past Farakka, all the way to Prayagraj, Allahabad, and back. You built a dam at Farakka, which is just inside West Bengal, so everything upstream of Farakka is now devoid of any fish, any lucrative fish. This region, Kahalgaon, on the Ganga, this village used to have 400 to 500 fishing boats that would go out every evening for the night fishing and come back. And this is what we saw in 2016. One boat, a few boats. And even so, what do they come back with? They come back with these tiny fish, which they call trash fish. It's not even fish that is lucrative. It will go straight into some kind of fish meal for some other thing. So it's not even something that anybody pays big bucks for. So you have a whole community of fishermen upstream of Farakka who are out of business completely. And then, of course, there are no jobs there. And so you are finding these people just sitting around. You find youth, our demographic dividend, sitting around doing absolutely nothing except play on their mobile phones. And progressively, this has been happening since 1971. So just imagine, right? There's huge out-migration. And so not only that, it collapsed Hilsa fishery in India. There is no Hilsa fishery upstream and very little downstream. The size of the Hilsa has dropped. Now, Bangladesh, on the other hand, has done certain things like introduce a ban on fishing when the fish is gravid and so on. So it's picking up there, and the Hilsa is coming back on the Bangladeshi side. But here we have no hope because there is the dam right upstream of where the fish needs to go. So our Hilsa fishery has crashed. That industry and the fish have depleted by 85 to 90%. And that was the mainstay of so many people. So there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of fishermen in debt. So that was number 2. Next one. What's the connection between road building in Arunachal to connect different valleys? So you have the East Siang Valley, you have the West Siang Valley, you have the Subansiri, you have various other valleys, right? So you need roads because, otherwise you'd have to go down, come back up, and so on. So there is a lot of road building going on. What's the connection between that road building and farmer distress in Assam? Anybody? Sorry? But the farmers are in Assam, which is in the plains.
Landslide getting into rivers.
Okay, very close, very close. Okay, we're going to talk about this. That's awesome. So we are now in the Siang Valley, which is just as you leave Assam and you push up the East Siang Valley and you're going up past Pasighat and you're going up to Tooting. If anybody has been there, you know what I'm talking about. It's absolutely gorgeous country. Right? And this was a photo that was taken in 2014, and the same hill, 2021. That's the road building part, but that's not the whole story. What they're doing for road building and for dams is that they're using boulders. And where do these boulders come from? They come from the rivers. So you are uprooting, just look at the size of the boulders, that's a JCB, and look at that boulder just off to it. It's almost as big as the cab of the JCB. These are massive boulders that they're breaking and they're taking, right? Every time you move a boulder, you remove a boulder, it displaces the sand underneath it. That's one thing. So that sand then goes into the system. But also, just like the butterfly effect, when you move something so large from the river is going to find a different path, or it's going to rush through, right? There's going to be changes in the river. And those 3 farmers that I showed you earlier on, when I was talking to them, they said that when they were young, their fathers would say Look to the mountains, which is Arunachal Pradesh. If you see it raining there, veils of rain, you know that you have 6 hours before the water comes into the rivers here, and you'll get water for your fields because there's going to be floods and all. This is the rainy season. It's supposed to flood. It's a floodplain. But they don't know what boulders have been removed. They don't know what courses have been altered. So this happened. A river which was supposed to flow in one direction completely left that. This is a riverbed which was completely dry, and it decided, this is the river, you can see the bridge, right? The river is supposed to flow underneath here. It's moved. So there's a bridge over nothing. And that river then came breaking embankments. It came right through their fields. But guess what? It's not just the river coming through, because then you can argue that that's okay, flooding, and that happens, that's natural. River carries silt, which is very fertile, but this river was carrying that sand which was displaced, and sand is inert. And when it hits the plains, it slows down, the river slows down, and the first thing it dumps is the heaviest load, which is sand. And all of that, this is that sand which is just dumped on paddy, and this is a food bowl for these people. All of that paddy was gone, and just see how much. This is another JCB. It's buried. The whole cab is buried under sand. It was 10 feet of sand, 3 meters of sand that was just dumped on these fields. And this happens regularly because there's constantly stuff changing in the mountains. So that was the connection between those two. So of course, what can the farmers do? They tell us there's nothing that they can do because the river has come through their fields, it's taken everything, it's dumped, so now it's inert. It's not even like when the river recedes, they can again farm because there's just sand there, and they have to migrate. What's the connection between a bridge? And this bridge is just a little bit away from that village that I just talked about, which had the sand coming. It's just a little off. This is a bridge over the Brahmaputra. If any of you have visited Assam recently, you might have gone on the Bogibeel Bridge. This is the Bogibeel Bridge. What is the connection between the Bogibeel Bridge and rampant erosion? It's just a bridge. Why is there rampant erosion downstream of the bridge? Downstream and upstream of the bridge? Anyone? Okay. See what the engineers did. This is the bridge. That's the river. I don't know whether you can make out, but what they have done is they have diked, embanked the river. There. Here and here. Can you see the two dikes? It's there and there. I'm going to show you another photo. This is a Google map, of course. You see that dike and you see this dike. But do you also see that what they have done is they have tried to squeeze the river so that they can build a shorter bridge. Can you see that? You see the width of the river just upstream. You see the width of the river downstream. And this is squeezed. Try pushing. If anybody has seen the Brahmaputra in monsoon, you know what I'm talking about. Try pushing that volume of water through something which is constricted. You're going to have some kind of you're going to have like a small reservoir built behind it, and it's going to rush through in front. Now, what ends up happening is that the left bank is fortified because there are oil fields there are tea plantations there's all kinds of things. But the north bank doesn't have anything. It's got farmers, and it's got soft, pliant land. So the water ends up just eating up the right bank. And that again is pushing people inland because it's almost a kilometer of land can fall off in a day. A kilometer wide land can fall off in a day. And people are pushed inland. And this is India. How far will you push people? I mean, these are hundreds of thousands of people. Where will they go? So of course, then they up and leave. And again, there's migration. This is what. So here, these people took me here, and they said that their village used to extend up till there. And of course, there's nothing left. It's funny, it's called Singhajan Ghat. I'm not kidding. You go to Google Maps and you can see there's a road which just stops. There's actually a sign which says Singhajan Ghat ahead. There's no ghat ahead. It's just, the road is just cut, and it's just the river. Because it's just eaten it up. It's not the river that's eaten it up. It's what we've done to it that's eaten it up. So even today, there are things, when you go there, there are regular erosions, things falling into the river. So that's what happens then. Because the people who built the bridge decided to dike it. And dike it not at the right width, but kind of cut corners. Okay, now we're leaving the northeast and the east, and we are swinging to the Thar Desert. What is the connection between afforestation? Planting trees is good, right? What is the connection between afforestation in the desert, planting trees on dunes to stabilize them, which is what is happening here, and water scarcity? On the dunes, okay? I'm talking about on the dunes. Okay. Trees do suck up water, but here we're building it on the dune. The dune is dry. What's the problem? So do the roots extend through the dune and to the ground, you're saying? Okay, I'm going to give you a small little surprise. We are going to put ourselves in 42 degrees in the middle of summer in Jaisalmer district, on top of a dune. Okay, this region, say, has not seen, when I was here, when this photo was taken, has not seen rain for 2 years, 22 months and counting. Okay, no rain. We're on the dune, we're sitting on the dune. I'm with my shepherd friend, Chattar Singh, and he's a man of few words. When he wants, he'll teach me, otherwise he'll be quiet. So we're sitting quietly, and he starts digging. 6 inches in, look what he's bringing up. Is that moisture you see? But there hasn't been rain. The dune holds water in its belly, and it doesn't evaporate because there are no cracks. So it's almost like a well. And the people who live in the desert know this. So when you talk about these people who divine and all that, they're just really good landscape readers. Because when you come down from the dune, and if anybody has tried slip sliding down a dune, you know that it's not a very elegant thing to do. But hey, you come down from the dune, and what you see is this hand-dug well with water not even 4-5 feet below. And it has not rained for 22 months. This well is full. And it is replenishing itself. You see the water there? Fresh water. It's pulling it from the dune. And as you walk the length of dunes, you will see these giving wells. Some of them have been shut because they'll be opened only when this one which has been giving will need to regenerate. So they'll shut that one and then they'll open another one. Hand-dug wells along the sides of dunes, because these shepherds, they walk with their goats, these desert goats, which then they get sent to like Kashmir and Amritsar and all for the Rogan Josh and so on. They stop on these things. And not only that, this was a known thing during the Silk Route. This was a part of it. This was one little branch of the Silk Route. And people used to come, when they used to go through to Jaisalmer, they used to know where to get water. You see a dune, you dig down below over there, you're going to get water. So the desert is full of water. You just need to know where to look, right? So even here, I don't know if you can see, this is a dune, this is a drone photo, you can't tell very well, but you can see that there's a well here. It baffles, right? When I went there, I couldn't believe my eyes. But then I've gone back enough times to know that it was not one-off. This really happens. So these are dunes, and then there are these wells there. And they're giving wells. So the more you pull up, the more they refill themselves from the sides. But the forest department thought that planting Israeli acacias, Acacia tortilis, is a good idea for afforestation, greening the desert. And so they planted all along the dunes. All along the dunes, they've planted tons and tons of Acacia tortilis, Israeli acacia. And along that whole dune system, there is no water at the bottom. So all these shepherds have had to alter their routes and come where there isn't such things. But then there is a huge drive to plant more and more of these inappropriate trees, which and in inappropriate places, which is causing a whole lot of harm and water scarcity in the Thar. To counteract that, what does the government do? It decides to pipe water from the Himalayas to the Thar. Because why if there's no water in the desert and all of that? If you tell them also, they will probably not listen. There is water in the desert. However, this is what is happening. The Indira Gandhi Canal, which all of you have probably heard of, comes from the Satluj all the way down to where Chhatar Singh lives, which is the deep Thar, which is on the Pakistan border. But by the time that water comes there, it looks like this. There's hardly any water. There's not that much water that you can get it all the way to Rajasthan. And the water looks like this. It's putrid, it's stinky, it's full of malarial parasites. It's got floating carcasses of animals that have fallen into the canal on the way, all open canals. We've walked it. We've walked from Punjab to Rajasthan along the canal, and we've seen it for ourselves how it is. And therefore, a district which had no incidence of malaria, they had not even seen a mosquito before this canal was built in the 80s, now has the highest incidence of malaria and dengue. They have their own way of method of rainwater harvesting, which I speak of in the book, which is fabulous, absolutely fabulous. They do so much with just 1 day of rain because they know how to read the land. So they are very self-sufficient in water. They do not have a water scarcity problem. But if you think that they do, and then you make, so Chhatar Singh called me the other day, he said they're building tube wells, which is now mining the fossil water out of the desert, which is not necessary. But that's what's happening. So that's going to then remove their bank, their savings of water. It's going to deplete it completely. Anyway, so that's the connection between trees and water scarcity. I think we're almost at the last one. What's the connection between jute and a sinking delta? The Sundarbans is sinking. What is the connection between jute and a sinking delta? Anyone? Yes? Very, very close. I'm so happy to hear this. Very close. And we'll get into it. So what happened, again, during the British Raj, was that there was a huge... So the Britishers basically wanted revenue from their lands, and they saw that the floodplains, right, where the river comes and floods and then leaves, they called those floodplains wastelands, because they thought of it as swampy and not very productive and so on. So they wanted to reclaim those wastelands, and the way they thought they would do that is if they could build bunds, embankments, so that the river would not flood, and then they can use and grow things over there and reap their harvests and so on. So they built these embankments. So everywhere you go in the east, on the Ganga, on the Brahmaputra, you're going to see embankments. It's like vast, vast kilometers, thousands of kilometers of embankments. What happens when you build an embankment is that it gives this sense of security, that people will think, okay, there's an embankment, so I can now create and do things beyond it. But if anybody knows the Ganga, anybody knows the Brahmaputra, these are untamable rivers. These rivers will flood because those are floodplains. They're supposed to flood. So they even break these embankments, which can't hold these rivers back, and they go. So then, of course, you have the newspaper screaming, saying, oh, the river floods again, and Assam is underwater, and so on. Why? It's supposed to be underwater. And if you read accounts of people in the 1900s and 1800s, the farmers, they waited for these floods because that is when their fields became fertile again. That is when the river brought little fish into their fields, which then helped them with their food and all of that, and then the fish grew and went back also into the river, and it acted as a fish nursery. There's a whole ecosystem with floods, which was good, which was welcomed. Yes, of course, there was some loss, but it was the thing that kept the floodplain going. The Britishers, some of them did see this, and there have been, if you read the book by Arupjyoti Saikia called The Unquiet River, Fabulous book, fabulous recounting of the history of how many people said you should not build embankments in this place because it's not the right thing to do, not the right thing to do by the river, by the land, by the people, any of it. But of course, nobody listens to reason. The Britishers came with their thoughts of the Thames and, building dikes and embankments and kind of constricting rivers. Now what has ended up happening is that, along with the dams upstream, just like you mentioned, the silt either stays in the main stem of the river and flows all the way out, or it is held behind the dam. And the silt is what builds deltas. It builds the Sundarbans. It builds the whole of Bengal is silt. In fact, a geographer, William Van Schendel, has said that it is almost as if Bangladesh is the Himalayas flattened out. That is what it is. It's built with silt. You can't hold back silt. You can't channel silt and then throw it away. You need that silt. And in fact, you need it even to shore up and build up the strength of the delta. If you don't do it, it will sink. And that is unfortunately exactly what's happening. Rivers are bursting embankments and creating havoc, and not really bringing the silt, because the silt stays in the river, in the main stem, and it flows right out. And so we're losing a lot of the richness that the river has and that it gives, and which is the natural cycle of the river is lost. This is again in the Ganga. This is the silt. Just look at the color. It's brown. This isn't just after monsoon. It's brown. It's rich with silt, thick with silt, and this is what is supposed to go. It's supposed to go onto the sides. I mean, we read every year. We'll all read, "Oh, Kaziranga is underwater. Poor animals." The animals welcome that. They know how to live with it. There's generational knowledge in those regions among people, among animals, of how to live with the floods. Floods are good. I'm not going to romanticize it because of all the things that we've done to the river. Now, if you have floods, it's going to cause havoc. But originally, the rhythm of the river, it was meant to flood floodplains. But now we have a sinking delta. So, basically, the reason I've told all of these stories is because we live in a very interconnected space, in a world which is interconnected. It always has been. That's how it works. If you have misinformed decisions leading to misguided actions, you will have cascading effects. I'm not pulling this out of thin air. These are just a few examples I've given. The book has more, but just look around us. In fact, if any of us is from Bellandur, okay, great. You have a lake there, you have the lakeside there, you know the slums, the shanties. Just ask where those people are from. That is not, there is a reason why those people have fled those parts of Bengal and come here. There is nothing there. We have taken it away from them by all the misguided decisions. And again, this is not a diatribe against any one government, any one person, any one company. This is a mindset. It is a mindset that has been going on, which has led from lands lost, erosion, unemployment, migration. I mean, you just name it. Everything leads to everything else. There are so many stories that are within these stories, in fact, like when you lose livelihood and you have children, it leads to early child marriage. It leads to child labor. And then that leads to all kinds of malnutrition problems, things like that. Everything connects up. It even becomes a public health problem. It's all interconnected. And so when people say, oh, you're an environmentalist, or that's an environmental issue, the environment is us. We are, this is all environment. BIC is sitting in environment. This is environment. It's not other, And so I think it's so important for us to make those connections and constantly be alive to those connections. Silos just don't work. And unfortunately, we have been living in silos. The hydrologist has his opinion, the sociologist has her opinion, the wildlife biologist has her opinion, and nobody talks to one another, when really landscapes are connected. And intersections between those connections are places which we need to pay attention to, even today. I was sitting the other day in a conversation that had to do with zero emissions, right? And people did not even know these stories. So the human aspect of stories did not even come into those conversations. The biodiversity aspect of stories did not come into those conversations because everybody is blinkered towards any one goal. The same way the Britishers were blinkered towards, we need to build railways, we need to do, because we have to do this, railways have to be above, we need to build the bunds, we need to build embankments, blinkered, without seeing the connections, how the landscape works. There are connections not just laterally, there are longitudinal connections. Like the Hilsa which lives in Sundarbans goes up to Allahabad, Prayagraj. There's even that. Those connections, look at it like a system, right? You have a basin, a river basin is a creature that lives and breathes. You can't break it up into parts and expect it to work. Protecting the innate resilience of a land is so important because once you lose that resilience, building back resilience is really hard. And we have that resilience. We still have it in India. We have a wonderful opportunity to protect what is with knowledge of how to live in that landscape, being still there among the elders of that land. And it behooves all of us to listen and learn and share. I don't know if you've noticed, I haven't yet said 2 words. I haven't even mentioned climate change. Because this is what is happening already on the ground, and all these people being pushed out to migrate are going to be finding, the numbers vary between 200 million to 300 million, maybe even 400 million people on the move in India alone. And that is almost the average, a whole USA on the move, right? These people are going to be on the move when climate change in what is happening now with heat indexes rising, you have all kinds of strange phenomena happening. I haven't even mentioned climate change, but look at how we have shot ourselves in the foot by undermining innate resilience, which would have at least given us a footing when things change, because things have changed in the past too. And people know how to deal, or they will be able to figure things out if they had a livelihood, they had something to do. So protecting innate resilience in the face of climate change is so important. And I think we still have that. And Harini and I were talking about it the other day. And she also says our cities still have, the smaller cities in fact, have a chance to do right, to become smart, truly smart, not just tech smart. Thank you.
This is how we'll do the question and answer. We'll have the mic over here. So whoever is thinking about having a question, I'll request that maybe start lining up in here. And I request that you keep the question brief and also introduce yourself. But before I actually open it up to to the audience, I have a couple of questions. One question is, how did you start? I mean, when did you start doing this? And follow-up question, how do you find a problem? What is your approach?
It goes back to childhood. My father marched with the Save the Western Ghats movement, the Silent Valley March, and then sat with the Narmada Bachao Andolan protesters also. So those conversations were always on in our house. And also, I recount this in my book, where my uncle, who worked at the World Bank, when he would come, my dad and he would have these absolutely raucous debates. And I would be cowering behind a curtain. I used to really think that they're just going to finish each other off. It was really like that, because he was for large dams, my uncle was, and my dad was completely against it. And so I've grown up with these kinds of conversations and so on. And I've always wanted to tell stories. I used to pore over National Geographics. There used to be there was a 3-volume, or rather 3 magazines, 3 issues that came back to back on the mega transect that Mike Fay did, where he walked across the Congo. And I used to think, oh man, I wish somebody would give me, a chance to walk across a landscape and tell stories. So that was, teenage years, and I've always wanted to tell stories. I lost my way a little bit, went into corporate. I worked in corporate for 10 years and so on. And then And then I think better sense prevailed, and I decided I wanted to tell stories. But I did realize I did not want to do one-off stories, one in and out. And I also somehow knew that I just felt that I wanted to tell stories about freshwater. And a conversation with S. Vishwanath, a few of you might know S. Vishwanath here, in 2012 in a cafe coffee day, he sent me on this thing. He said, go meet Chattar Singh in the desert and start your journey. And that's how it began.
Great. To find something like a, it's more like a research topic, right? You really, go and pick it up. I mean, how do you decide on it?
Yeah, so Chattar Singh was just like this, and then afterwards, of course, he opened up a world to me, and I kept going back to the desert every month for a year and a half, and it was just like, amazing learning. But at that time, of course, my dad's, what I've heard growing up about dams and things like that, I saw a map published by Sandrup, and there they had these small black bars all across Arunachal Pradesh on all the tributaries coming into the Brahmaputra. 160 dams or something that was planned in that region, which was like unimaginable to me. So I decided that I want to spend time documenting the Ganga-Brahmaputra basin, which is the largest, most populated basin in the world. And so I went there, and truly I can't say that I have some kind of a magic formula. I just book one-way tickets. I go with maybe a name in my hand, of somebody with a phone number. I start from there, and usually that sets the ball rolling. You watch, you see things, you learn, you talk to people, you listen, and one thing leads to another. And like everything is interconnected, essentially one thing has led to another, and I'm still. When I go back to that basin, I have not even scratched the surface.